Hey everybody, and welcome back to Maverick Games. It's Dwayne here, and for the second time I'm apologizing for not having regular content out. Thought I'd segue and let you know that as an adult with ADHD, it becomes very challenging for me to actually create consistent content. Being a content creator with ADHD is not the funnest thing in the world. So my mind kind of moves around in different circles and different patterns, and mostly when I get a large string of content hitting the channel, it's because I have a lot of thoughts that are wanting to be articulated in some way. And then when I don't, you're seeing sort of a drought of content. And it's not because I don't want to make the content, but my brain operates in sort of patterns, and I just have to wait for it to come back around into the content creating pattern. Today, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite VTTs, and I'm going to revisit it because I have done some previous videos on Harpy, but I didn't really approach Harpy in the right way that I think I should have approached it back when I originally did those videos. Today, we're going to talk about how Harpy is the best VTT to build your campaign world. Now, I am going to be touching a little bit on the virtual table side of things, but for now in this video, I'm going to be talking about how to set up Harpy and how to lay the groundwork for your campaign in the Harpy virtual table. So let's dive in. When you go to Harpy's website, that is harpy.gg, you're going to be greeted by this welcome page, and it's probably going to be very confusing as to what exactly Harpy is. It's not quite laid out as well as, say, Roll20 or Foundry and whatnot, and what it is and what you're actually supposed to be doing. Now, keeping in mind, Harpy is actually being made and developed by a single individual. So, if you are concerned about maybe the layout and the presentation of Harpy, keep that in mind. This is not a team of people working to create this product that is now being delivered. So Harpy is a free-to-use virtual tabletop as well as world builder, but you can actually pay for a premium membership, which will unlock certain functionalities and certain enhanced features. So the first thing you need to do is obviously make an account with Harpy. I've already previously made an account with Harpy, so I'm not going to go through that process, but that would be the first step in your way. Scrolling down, it's going to talk a little bit about Harpy and what it does, and it's going to talk about the virtual table, world builder, and yes, a play-by-post. I don't play play-by-post games myself, but I understand that there's a really passionate fan base for that, and so yeah, Harpy does accommodate that in a very cool way. You'll see here as well that it talks about some of the games that you can play, and while they do list these games, Harpy is a system-agnostic VTT, meaning there is no baked-in rule set in Harpy. So when they talk about using these games, it's not like there's going to be a marketplace to purchase any of the rule books and whatnot. You can pretty much play any game you want on Harpy. And some testimonials as well. Down here in the corner, you'll see my testimonial. So let's jump into the World Builder tab in Harpy, and I'm going to walk you through some of the basics on how to set up your world. So I'm going to create a new world, but you'll see here that I've got two existing game worlds I've already previously set up. So I'm going to create a new world for this example and for this video. Clicking on a new world, the first thing it's going to want to do is give it a cover. Now, I'm a visual learner, I'm a visual guide, so for me, I love having graphics to go along with everything. So whether that be organizing my D&D notes or anything, you'll always see thumbnails. So this is your chance to create a thumbnail. So let's go with this thumbnail right here. You can go up and resize it if you'd like. And I'll do that there. Bingo. And you're going to want to give it a name. I'm going to call this one the YouTube test campaign. Voila, you've created your world. This is going to be the foundation for your entire Harpy experience. So creating this world is the first thing you want to do. Now, you're going to notice here along the side panel that you're going to have a list of icons. These icons represent the different entities that exist within your world. Now, an entity is essentially just a piece of information. Now, why is this important? Well, as a dungeon master, I have lots of information. Lots of information that I'm constantly writing down, creating, and placing in different areas on the World Wide Web. Whether that be a Google Doc, whether that be in Microsoft Notes or uploaded to a cloud service, stored in Dungeons & Dragons Beyond. I just have a constant amount of information that I'm typing out and putting in different areas. I don't have one specific way to keep my notes anchored within my game world. So Harpy provides I want to call it an archive or a codex system where you can actually create entries and store them right in the Harpy tabletop. I'm going to walk you through what these are. So we have a characters section, We have a monster or creature section. We have places. We have groups. We have items, stories, abilities, events, and notes. Now you're probably wondering why you need all these categories, and it does get kind of excessive, but if you break down some of the things that are going on in your campaign, this is a world building tool. So any magical items that the players have, any notes that you want to keep track of, or any abilities, spells, anything that you want to anchor to your world that are unique to your setting, or maybe even just copies right from the player's handbook, you can put in here. Now the creature tab and the character tab directly connects to the virtual tabletop. And I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit, but I'm going to walk you through how to create an entry. So let's create our first entry in this YouTube test campaign. Let's start off by creating a character. So when you click on the character entry, and these are all going to be the same across all these categories, this interface, what you're seeing, is going to be identical. The only difference is where this information is being stored. So in this case, I'm going to create a character. So let's go in and let's create a character. So we can attach a thumbnail to it. There we go. We can resize it and we've got our thumbnail. Let's call him Eric the Dragon King. This name will be displayed in your entity, and it's important that you use these forms, you use these sections to actually catalog everything, because as your campaign world starts to grow, you're going to have lots of entries, so it's important that you name them all properly. Now there's a tab underneath. This is in case you have an entity that you've created and you don't want players actually seeing the proper name for it. It's kind of used in very rare circumstances. I'm going to leave it blank. Now let's put a description in for Eric. Eric is the king of a remote clan of Dragonborn. And let's create a tag. Tags are going to make searching easier later on. So let's create a new tag here. Let's call it characters. Okay, we've now created our first entity in Harpy. We're going to create this. Now this is where things get interesting. So Harpy is not going to pull information inherently from any other source, so whether that be a rulebook or a compendium or anything, because it doesn't have any compendiums. But what it does have is a very cool way of cataloging information that you put into it. In this case, it gives me a blank codex screen, allowing me to add pages of information, whether you type it out or whether you import it from an external source. By double clicking on here, you can actually pull up a word editor. If you want to type and add content information about Eric the King yourself, feel free and go ahead and do it. You can also input images and words or text by copying and pasting from another source. So in this case, let's say that Eric is a Dragonborn that we've pulled from D&D Beyond. Let's go and grab a stat block and put it in here to represent for Eric. So what I've done is I've gone and grabbed a Ranger stat block for Eric the King, and I'm going to put that directly in to my entity. I double click here. I'm just going to go up there and paste in the Ranger stat block. It'll upload it to Harpy, and that graphic is all ready to go. I'm now going to save that, and voila, I have a stat block for Eric the King. I've now edited that line to be called stats. So now when we come and visit this entity within Harpy, you're going to see the thumbnail and you're going to see the stat block. Now there are other things as well called gallery, tokens, and a sheet. And I'm going to leave sheet alone for now, as that's currently being worked on and developed. The gallery is a space for you to input images. So if you want to add some extra little visual flair to your codex entry, you can do so. In this case, I'm going to go and upload a picture. And this exists mainly to add fluff and flavor to your codex entry. I'm going to add that in, and now that's now attached as a gallery. If you have pictures or artwork that you want to attach to this particular entity, you can do so. Now, it really gets interesting when you talk about tokens. So, tokens are mainly used for creatures and characters. Now, a token is how this character or this entity is going to be represented in your virtual tabletop, which we'll get to in a little bit. So right now, we don't have anything that's really attached to Eric the Dragon King. He is going to use the default thumbnail art as a token in the tabletop. But if you wanted to, you could upload a variety of different options. So Harpy provides a 3D virtual tabletop, and by default is just going to take the artwork from the thumbnail and create a token for you, as you can see here. Further to that, you can go and create paper tokens, and you can also link your Hero Forge minis as well. If you have a library of Hero Forge minis, you can actually link your Hero Forge account to Harpy and have access to all of those minis. So in this case, I have quite a lot of money spent in Hero Forge creating digital minis, far more than I'd like to get into. But if you do have one that is suitable, or if you've gone and created one uniquely for your player, you can go ahead and use that. Let's go and grab one that might suit the situation here. So as you can see, the Hero Forge mini is imported in glorious detail. And I can choose to have that be the default representation for that. Paper minis are also an option. And paper minis are kind of a new thing for me. Paper tokens are essentially what you'd get if you were buying a Pathfinder starter box where it has the pawns that are just basically cardboard. You can go and create your own by uploading flat images, and it'll convert it into sort of a quasi 3D token for you. Very cool. In this case, we're going to stick with my Hero Forge miniature. So when all is said and done, we now have an entry in our Harpy system as a single character. Now you can go through and start adding as much content as you want, whether it be magic items, abilities, spells, any content you think is going to be relevant when you're playing your game. One of the things that I currently use Harpy for is stories. I go and create a storybook, basically that contains all my campaign notes. And I'm going to show you how I do this. First things first, I'm going to upload a thumbnail because, you know, I love thumbnails. So in this case, I'm going to take some cover artwork from the Shattered Obelisk that I'm currently running, and I'm going to call this the test campaign. Now I own the Shattered Obelisk book in D&D Beyond. So for those of you who actually have digital content that exists on the internet that you've purchased or that you just have, this next step is going to be very easy for you. Now if you are creating your adventures and campaigns out of whole cloth, you're going to be doing a lot of typing in here, and that's where you double click and you can do that right directly in Harpy via the word editor. But if you've got this digital content, let's go ahead and actually put this digital content right into Harpy so we don't have to keep flip-flopping back and forth between our original source and the Harpy tabletop. So here we are in D&D Beyond, and I'm actually gone to the Phandelver and below the Shattered Obelisk digital product that I've purchased. Now I'm just going to bring this right into Harpy via good old-fashioned copy and paste. So I'm going to take this first chapter, or this summary, and I'm going to go down to here, and I'm just going to right click and go copy. I'm going to go back over to Harpy. I'm going to paste that in entirely. So there you go. My entire adventure path and all of my notes are now contained within the Harpy virtual table without me having to flip-flop back and forth between the two different websites. I'm going to save that right here. And that's now entered into my Harpy VTT as a story entry. So congratulations. My Harpy Codex is now growing. It's growing every little bit every time I enter a new entry into it. It gets really exciting when you want to start to add creatures in, and I'll show you that too. So let's talk about how this comes together in the form of a virtual tabletop. You've got some entries in, but you want to start playing Dungeons & Dragons or whatever game it is that you're playing. Let's show you how you can do that with the Harpy VTT. You're going to come up here and go Virtual Tabletop. In this case, we're going to create a new one, and we're going to call it My New Table. I'm going to add that thumbnail. In this case, I'm just going to put a generic thumbnail that I've got in my library. Now, it's going to ask you to select a world that you want to attach this table to, and that's important because it's going to link all of your entities and give you access to those entities in your virtual tabletop in real time. So I'm going to go ahead down here and select my YouTube test campaign, and I'm going to create it. Now you'll see we're in an entirely different interface. We are in the virtual tabletop interface. Your world still exists within Harpy and just a click away. But now we're going to set about creating an actual virtual table. So the first thing you're going to see is that this is a blank table. It needs to have a map on it. So let's go ahead and select a map. I'm going to go down here and pick a pre-selected map that I've already got created. Now, one of the things that I like to do with Harpy is I like to create a table within a table. The table within a table concept for me was my way of creating a virtual table that actually looks like the kind of table you'd be sitting around with your friends playing Dungeons & Dragons. Now at the moment, there are no animated dice within Harpy, but the idea is that when that arrives, you're going to see animated dice sort of throwing onto the table like you would in a real person game. I've also created a specific template within Photoshop that I put my maps within. So this exists sort of as a separate standalone step that you're going to create. But if any of you want to actually see how I go about doing this, just let me know in the comments below, and I will actually go ahead and make a video on how I actually go about doing this in Photoshop. For now, I'm going to lay this out so my players can actually put some tokens and start playing D&D. The first thing I'm going to do is toggle some settings. I'm going to remove the grid that Harpy automatically lays down onto it. So right now, I'm going to adjust the transparency down to as little as I can make it so that you don't see any overlying grid. And I'm going to reduce the thickness of any Harpy grids that you might see. And I'm going to save that. So now you'll see that my map that I created in Photoshop actually does have grid lines. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to place a token down on the map. In the lower corner, you have options for maps, their initiative tracking, as well as the ability to put some tokens down. So I'm going to go ahead and put that character that we created, Eric the King. Eric's coming in, and he is now represented on the tabletop via my 3D Hero Forge token. Going back to hovering over him, there's the description that I had when I created him. Eric is the king of remote clan of Dragonborn. But this token is now fully in our 3D environment. Now let's take it a step further and show you how we're going to access Eric's information. Because remember, this is a system agnostic virtual table. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to go up to my side panel, and this is uniquely a Dungeon Master interface. The players aren't able to add codex entries in themselves, but you as a Dungeon Master can add some hotbar codex entries in the top. The players will have access to any characters they create. Let's add in an entry, and let's get Eric in here. So now Eric, as a codex entry, or an entity, exists within the virtual tabletop. I don't have to keep flip-flopping back and forth to find him in the Harpy website. Further to that, if I click on him, you're going to see his stat block listed right there. So that there is how players can actually bring their character information right into Harpy without needing a sort of connective thread between their D&D Beyond account. You can go the old-fashioned route, create a character sheet, save it as a JPEG and upload it right into Harpy, or you could actually just go in and create the character sheet right in Harpy with the word editor. Whatever they want to do is fine by them. Heck, even if they want to keep using D&D Beyond, that's fine. They don't need to have that information present within Harpy. It just makes it so that the players aren't bouncing back and forth between two different websites. I myself am trying to pull my players back into an older school of playing Dungeons & Dragons. I really don't like the click interface that D&D Beyond has sort of trained everybody into how they play D&D by clicking on a button and watching the dice roll and doing all the math behind the scenes. I actually play with younger gamers, so for me, the educational component of Dungeons & Dragons is a really big deal. So I like to encourage them to have just static character sheets that aren't clickable, and then roll dice within it. So speaking of rolling dice, going into the chat option here in Harpy gives you the option to type. You can say hello, you can roleplay non-verbally. All of those chat interactions can take place right within the Harpy virtual table, like any good virtual table. But keeping in mind, that's not something that D&D Beyond currently offers. If you want to engage in non-verbal communication with D&D Beyond, you have to default to your voice software like Discord or whatever else you're using. Here, it's contained within Harpy. Not only that, you do have a dice roller option. So if you want, you can actually click the little dice symbol down below there, and you'll see that there's an entry point where you can actually put in your dice rolls manually. So in this case, and Harpy will roll digital dice for you, delivering the results right there in the chat bar. Further to that, if you click on it, it'll reveal what the actual dice roll was, not just the end result. Now there is an option to link your D&D Beyond account to Harpy, so you can actually have the synergy that we were talking about where they can roll on their D&D Beyond sheet, and the results of those D&D Beyond rolls will come right over into the Harpy chat. So if you are going to encourage them to use D&D Beyond as their main character sheet, and that's how you want them to interact with their character sheet, you can link that up here and it will bring the results over to you, the Dungeon Master, and other players who are just watching the Harpy chat box. I know it's a lot of different interfaces, but again, the goal for me is to try and bring everybody under the one interface, the one hood, so to speak, so that we're not bouncing back and forth trying to look up information. Some of the functions that the virtual tabletop in Harpy offers is the ability to go to full screen, allowing you to sort of veto the interface. So if players are wanting to get a better view of the table without all of the information surrounding it, you can go to that. In addition to that, you can actually take pictures. It has a great photo taking option where you can actually claim the picture. In addition to that, you can actually go down to a top-down view. By clicking on the camera button, you can turn Harpy into a 2D flat table. Your tokens are viewed from a top-down angle. And if you really wanted to get clever, much like how Foundry does their virtual tabletop, you could remove the bases, and now voila, you've got yourself your Hero Forge token in the form of a top-down token, using a traditional 2D grid system. Now, this is especially important because, as we talked earlier, all the creatures and entities that you put into Harpy are created as flat tokens. So any of those entities that you put into that are going to be able to be dropped right onto this table, already existing as a flat token. Let's talk about adding scenes. So right now I have the one map and the one scene, but let's suppose that I have other sort of encounters that I want to queue up, and I don't want to have to drop them in real time and have my players wait for me to do all the procedural stuff. I can go in here and I can create a new scene. I'm going to create a new scene called Test 2. Test 2 is just like the previous one. I have to select a map. As you can see, I have lots of maps here, so I'm going to grab another map. And here we go. I have another map on the table ready to go, again in my sort of unique style of having a table in a table type concept. And I can further go down and I can drop tokens into this map ahead of the players actually being in the map. You'll notice here over on the left hand side that I don't have any players in each of these zones yet because I haven't invited any players to the campaign. But once players are in here, I can drag players to specific scenes. So if I want to, I can have players holding in one scene while I set up the other scene. Or I can just have the scene already pre-set up and just click and have all the players magically appear in that scene. So there is a lot behind the scenes that facilitates easy Dungeon Master control over the virtual tabletop. Something that I haven't seen in a very long time, at least not in a very easy to use way such as this. So now that I've showed you how to set up your own Harpy tabletop, I'm going to show you one of my worlds that I've already started filling up so that you can actually get an idea of what this might look like if you actually commit to the process and start filling up your Harpy virtual table and building out your world. You'll see here that my Dungeons & Dragons campaign has 23 entries in the character section. I run 3 games a week and all of them take place in my own custom world, so I thought I'd better create a library of characters. You'll see here that most of them are pretty empty as players are using D&D Beyond to store all their information, but some of these characters do have information that I find relevant to keeping track of information about them. NPCs go into my character tab, not my creature tab, and I store as much information as I can. Now, depending on who I want to be able to access information, I can toggle the permissions to allow players access to certain characters and certain pieces of information. And some of my characters have actually gone so far as to actually create unique character sheets that live within Harpy. Here's an example of one of my player characters. I've actually gone and created in Google Slides a custom character sheet so that the player doesn't have to bounce around. He has everything he needs to see right here inside of the Harpy interface. I've included his gear, his abilities, his attack actions, including his class features, all of this pulled directly from D&D Beyond, but putting it into one space allows for this player to not have to keep bouncing back and forth. I've done this for a few of my players, and it so far seems to be working out fairly well. The players really appreciate having that information on hand. Going further, my bestiary is growing quite large as well. So I've gone through and I've placed critters, characters, monsters, all sorts of different things that might be relevant to my campaign or in real time as players are actually encountering them. From a roleplay point of view, I also started putting in locations that players have visited and information about past places. This helps to actually bring the campaign together and also gives players the ability to just sort of casually peruse the campaign information without me having to sort of throw it in front of them every single day at the session. If they want to learn a little bit more about the game world, they can do so just by coming here. Now, we talked about my needs, is I've actually gone and created specific campaign books that I can access during my gameplay. So we talked about the Shattered Obelisk campaign. I've copied that all into here. So during gameplay, I can actually use this information while we're playing without actually having to bounce back over to another site. I can also organize this by chapters right here by creating multiple tabs down the side, and this will help me organize my information as well. Maps, notes, stat blocks, you name it, can all be put into here. Here's an example of what it looks like during a virtual tabletop session, and I want to access my notes. I can simply come over here to my codex, I click on it, and I have access to chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 5. All of this information is contained right here along the side of the virtual table. If I want to clear some of these boxes and still have access, I can reshape and resize, and that way I can have a better, clear view of the tabletop, but also still having all of my notes here listed down along the side. So I want to thank all of you guys for coming back and doing a little revisit of the Harpy virtual tabletop. I've gotten fired up in using this new tabletop, especially after I've gotten a hands-on with the Project Sigil early alpha, and it's been a little bit cumbersome to say the least. So I kind of wanted to go back to a 3D virtual table with tokens to give my players a little bit more immersion, but at the same time I really needed something that was going to help me organize my notes and keep the behind-the-scenes aspect of dungeon mastering all running nice and smoothly. I think Harpy is going to do that for me. So again, apologies for not having a consistent cadence of content. I'm hoping to rectify that and get my brain in order as we move forward. But look for some more Harpy videos to come, as well as, you know, a unique insight into how I look at Dungeons & Dragons. I hope you're all having a great time playing Dungeons & Dragons, and we'll talk to you soon. Before you go, I need your help. I'm trying to grow the exposure of what we do here at Maverick Games. My goal is to actually bring information to parents and students for fun, academics, and even support of neurodivergency. Please subscribe and make sure you click on those notifications. I don't do paid ads or sponsorships. And I hope that you can find content here that's enjoyable for yourself and maybe others. Thank you very much, and thanks for tuning in.